didn't have to kill her. You had that choice, so you said sorry. I'm not going to accept it right now because my heart is cold. And every time I look at my grandkids, they don't have the money. And you had a choice, you didn't have to kill her. It's not nothing that she could have done to get killed. She was a good person. She had a whole life ahead of her. I loved her. That was my daughter. And you sat at my dinner table, you ate my food, you talked to me, all that, and you would turn around and just kill my daughter. And not only did you kill her, you played like an animal. You left, you went around the corner and got somebody else to try to shove her in the car. I know if you would have got away with it, you was going to take her and hide her. You wasn't going to want to be held accountable for killing my daughter. And then you did it like an animal in the car. You just threw her all in there and all that, and you think because you say sorry, and how I'm supposed to feel. I live with this every day. Every day I wake up and open my eyes. My daughter's not here. I gotta look at my grandkids every day and look at them, and it's not they're not here.
I'm not saying that he would have saved her life. Maybe he would have. Probably he wouldn't have. But at least she would have had the dignity of not being wrapped in a blanket and dragged into the bowels of her own home. Past the closed door, beyond which was the hallway where his child and her children slept. He wants the minimum end of the guidelines. Remember the one witness who testified, who was watching him drag her body outside. How did he treat Shameka Oliver? Treated the corpse, like it meant nothing to them. So wasn't it?
A gunshot doesn't wait for the right time. It doesn't check if it's a work day. It doesn't check if there are kids getting ready for school or a woman getting ready to head to a job she was good at. It just goes off, and then everything after it is different. On a quiet street in Jackson, Michigan, at 7 in the morning, one gunshot went off. By the time anyone could do anything about it, a 30-year-old woman was already gone. Her name was Shameka Oliver. She was a mother of 4 daughters. She was a supervisor at a senior care home, the kind of job where people depend on you to be gentle and patient. She was known, by the people who knew her, for her faith and for showing up for her family. It would take almost 5 years for the truth of that morning to be laid out in front of a jury. This is her story, told using only what is actually known and documented, nothing invented, nothing dramatized beyond the facts. Thursday, May 28, 2020, Jackson, Michigan. It was still early. The kind of hour when a neighborhood is mostly quiet, when the loudest thing on a street is usually a garbage truck or a car warming up in a driveway. On the 1200 block of Chittick Avenue, someone heard a gunshot. Not a car backfiring, not fireworks. A gunshot, sharp enough and close enough that whoever heard it picked up the phone and called it in. Jackson police officers were dispatched to the address. When they got there, they found Shameka Oliver outside the home where she lived. She had been shot once. Medical personnel arrived and worked to save her. It wasn't enough. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Police also found a 33-year-old Jackson man at the residence. He was someone who knew Shameka. He was taken into custody on the spot and held at the Jackson County Jail, while detectives figured out exactly what had happened inside that house, before officers ever arrived. That's the entire beginning of the case, and for a long time, it was also almost the entire public record. A homicide, a woman, a man in custody, a street address, a time on the clock. Everything else the world would eventually learn about Shameka, who she was, who the man was to her, what happened between them, took years to come out in full, because the case itself took years to reach a courtroom. Strip away the police report, and here is what people who actually knew Shameka Oliver said about her. She was born on December 2nd, 1989. By the time she died, she was 30 years old, and the mother of 4 daughters, a woman with a household built around her kids. She worked as a supervisor at Renaissance Northland Home, a senior care facility. In a job like that, the people you're caring for are often at their most vulnerable. Elderly residents who need someone patient, someone consistent, someone who treats them like they still matter. Shameka was described as being highly regarded there for exactly that kind of compassionate care. She was also known, by people in her community, for her faith and for her dedication to her family. Not headline material. Not the stuff of a dramatic true crime twist. Just a woman who worked, who believed in something bigger than herself, who was raising 4 daughters, and who was gone in the time it takes to hear one gunshot and run outside. That's the part of these stories that's easy to skip past when you're chasing a hook, but it's the part that actually matters. Whatever came next in a courtroom, whatever detectives pieced together about that morning, none of it changes the fact that 4 kids lost their mother on a Thursday, before most of Jackson had even had its coffee. In the days after the shooting, Jackson police publicly confirmed what they had: a homicide victim, Shameka Lajuan Oliver, 30 years old, shot once outside her own home. A man who knew her, in custody. A detective's name and phone number, Detective Aaron Grove, put out to the public in case anyone had information. A Crime Stoppers tip line, for anyone willing to talk anonymously. That's how these cases start in real life. Not with a dramatic reveal, but with a short press release and a request for help. Homicide investigations run on evidence. Physical evidence at the scene, witness statements, phone records, forensic reports, and all of that takes time to collect, and even more time to build into a case a prosecutor is confident enough to bring to trial. For Shameka Oliver's case, that time stretched on for years. The public record shows that the man taken into custody that morning was eventually identified, in later reporting, as Rodney Stevenson, 38. Described in court coverage as Shameka's boyfriend. The case against him was built around the idea that this had been an act of domestic violence. Prosecutors would later argue in court that Stevenson shot Shameka to death. Why almost 5 years passed between the shooting and the trial isn't something the available public reporting explains in detail. Cases can be delayed by everything from evidence review, to competency issues, to court backlogs, to the pandemic itself, which hit Michigan courts hard just months after Shameka died. What's documented is simpler. A woman died in May 2020, and a trial for the man accused of killing her didn't begin until January 2025. The trial opened in Jackson in January 2025. On one side, the prosecution laid out its case plainly, that Rodney Stevenson had shot his girlfriend, Shameka Oliver, to death, and that it had happened as an act of domestic violence, inside or just outside the home the two of them were connected to, on a morning that started like any other. On the other side, the defense pushed back hard on the idea that the evidence actually proved Stevenson pulled the trigger. According to court coverage of the trial, the defense argued there was no direct evidence that Stevenson shot her, and asked the jury not to fill in gaps with assumptions. Essentially, that the prosecution's case relied on inference rather than proof. That's the tension at the center of almost every trial like this one. Physical evidence rarely tells the whole story on its own. It takes gunshot residue reports, timeline reconstruction, statements from people who knew the couple, and whatever else investigators gathered in those 5 years, all pieced together and argued in front of 12 people who weren't there that morning, and have to decide, beyond a reasonable doubt, what happened. The available public reporting on the trial itself is limited, as is often the case with local homicide trials that don't draw national attention. What is documented, clearly, is the outcome. The jury convicted Rodney Stevenson of second-degree murder in the death of Shameka Oliver. At sentencing, the judge handed down a term of 80 to 120 years in prison. That's not a number picked to sound dramatic. It's a real sentence, on the real public record, for a real man in a real Michigan courtroom. A sentence long enough that, barring some legal reversal down the road, Stevenson will not walk free again. For Shameka's family, the verdict came almost 5 years after they lost her. 5 years of a case sitting open. 5 years of 4 daughters growing up without their mother, waiting for a courtroom to say, formally, what had happened to her. There's no dramatic twist to add here, and there doesn't need to be one. What's left on the public record is this. A 30-year-old woman named Shameka Lajuan Oliver, born in December 1989, a mother of 4, a care worker who was good at her job and good to the people she looked after. A single gunshot on a Thursday morning in May 2020. A boyfriend charged, tried and convicted of second-degree murder almost 5 years later. A sentence of 80 to 120 years. Online. In the years since, people who knew her, or simply heard about her case, have left messages remembering her. Small, plain tributes. The kind that don't try to dress anything up. People calling her family, missing her, lighting a candle for her online, because there's nowhere else to put that feeling. That's usually how it goes with cases like this. There's no elaborate scheme, no mastermind, no final twist waiting in the last 5 minutes. There's a person who was loved, a morning that went wrong, years of waiting, and a courtroom that eventually said what happened, as plainly as the law allows. Shameka Oliver was somebody's mother, somebody's co-worker, somebody's friend at a senior home where the residents counted on her. She woke up on a Thursday like any other, and by 7 in the morning, she was gone. That's the whole story. It didn't need anything added to it to matter.